Being the people who live in the world's societies, we also need our own sense of individuality to counterbalance the effects of other people upon ourselves, different ideas and belief systems. This means everyone has to learn to think for themselves in general terms, and this is why many people study the work of great philosophers and how all the important ideas in the world developed in their times, as they can help us to understand our own. In very early times, people started to develop writing and languages before becoming capable of more abstract thought. But before alphabets with actual letters, they managed to develop symbolism. The early pictorial diagrams show images of people, animals, mountains, and trees. Over time, the invention of mathematics enabled people to record the numbers of things, like the phases of the moon, navigate, and create calendars. Hence, written history began with practical calculations and financial records. By the early ancient world, people were creating pantheons of gods and using them in myths to describe how civilizations came into existence, their distinctive identities, prophecies, and managing their direction. In Aristotle in ancient Greece. In the Middle Ages, the rise of monotheism prompted philosophers like Thomas Aquinas to discuss theological issues, such as whether the papacy should have control of the monarchies or whether it was right for merchants to raise prices when buyers were in desperate need. His teaching started the Renaissance and is still important for people training in the church. Then, in the early modern period, people started to question traditional values as science discovered things like the Earth was not the center of the universe. This led to the rise of philosophers such as John Locke, who argued that we learn everything we know about the world through the senses. Voltaire questioned whether people were actually free to think for themselves, or simply trapped in social systems which were controlled by people by telling them that they were free. Due to the rise of democratic governments and the middle classes, the Industrial Revolution of the late modern period led to the ideas which govern modern politics today. Adam Smith wrote the rules of modern capitalism in The Wealth of Nations, and this was criticized by David Ricardo for the failure of the capitalists to pass on their wealth down the chain to the workers. And this led to later Karl Marx as the socialists moved towards communism when it appeared in the mid 1800s. Trade unions argued for the rights of workers and challenged the privileges of employers, while socialists argued against the monarchy and inherited social status. When fascism emerged to counter the communists, they took control of German philosopher Martin Heidegger, and as a result, his work was largely discredited after World War II. After this, the structure of postmodernity appeared, and Marshall Berman subsequently wrote the book on the structure of the postmodern age, called All That Is Solid Melts into Thin Air, which has been widely quoted, and it shows how the nature of events in our current age tends to dissolve into something greater than itself, which somehow justifies all of its problems and all the methods that have been used, and permitted the educated to achieve what would have otherwise been impossible, which correlates with the tendency for the structure of postmodernity to evolve into something more objective, especially with the rise of computers, hence creating the shift to the Anthropocene. So now, with regard to this new period, French philosopher Bruno Latour has said that the new problem this age is facing is that there are plenty of opportunities and technology around now. What with the shift to green energy and ways to improve our lives, the question is how to choose the right direction for ourselves. Hence, it can be seen how the philosophy of our coming age has evolved through the various stages which lead all the way to the present. In general, this means people who understand how the ages change are more secure in being able to see why things are this way now. While the people who follow philosophy and ideas over time can use them to develop their understanding of the big picture, as the two are inseparable, given that the ideas we use now are derived from the times we live in, with each social group having its own language and buzzword, so to speak. Because of the relationship between language and ideas, not only do philosophers need to develop their ideas in relation to contemporary audiences, they also need to make sense within the context of their time. So looking at the events we're seeing now in the news, it would seem that we still have social issues which will be addressed by philosophers of the future, who can help us to express ideas related to the coming age. And we can see why people do not deal with certain issues now because of problems which are impossible to solve.